So welcome back again to our next session. As I talk to you about continuing to understand your city and your context. And I want to talk to you now about what I call exegeting your city. And you can do this whether it's in a city or whether it's in a neighborhood or it's a university. And some of the principles you can probably apply also to understanding the people group that you're trying to reach. So let me just give you a few things. I'm taking this from the book called Salt and Light that was compiled by Andy Rittenhouse, who did probably the most extensive study on exegesis of Knoxville, Tennessee. But he gives us a few pointers here to begin with. So when we talk about exegesis of a city, there are four primary questions that we're trying to understand. And exegeting a city is similar to when we talk about exegeting a book of the Bible, a book from the Bible. We use the same principles. If we're going to study First Peter, we would look at it from the big picture first. We would read it maybe 6 or 10 times using different translations. We would then go down to the micro parts. So same thing when you're exegeting a city, a neighborhood, or a university, you're doing the same types of things. So the four questions that we're trying to answer are: number one, what are the most important things to know about our city, our neighborhood, our university, our company, or our people group? We're not trying to answer everything, but we're trying to answer the important things. Number two, how is God at work in this context? What are the signposts or building blocks of transformation and grace? If I was to come to your city and I was to ask you the question, where would you take me in your city to show me where God is at work? I would love to get a tour of where you live and see how you would answer that question. I've done that in many different cities. Where would you take me to show me where God is at work in your city? Number two, and these will give me the questions at the end of this lecture that I want you to answer. Number two, where would you take me in your city to show me where God needs to be at work? So we're trying to answer those types of questions. Number three, what are the critical needs and opportunities for showing and sharing God's love in this location? And number four, how can individuals and organizations collaborate in the work of God's kingdom? So in exegeting our context, and if you want a good definition of exegesis, go to sfexegesis.com. SF meaning the city of San Francisco, sfexegesis.com. I'm one of the advisors on that website that helped give birth to that website. You'll see a good explanation of exegesis. So when you're exegeting your context, these four questions, and then you're really starting to start with the big picture. So number one, what is the surrounding context? So if I'm exegeting San Francisco, I'm thinking about, well, what does San Francisco belong to? It belongs to the Bay Area. And what is the Bay Area like? And what does the Bay Area belong to? It belongs to the state of California. And what is California like? Context, where things are placed, have a big effect on how things behave. So you want to look at the surrounding context. Who's nearby? Who's next door? What does it belong to? Et cetera, et cetera. What state and country are you located in? What is the general attitude of that state and country? California is seen as kind of a very liberal state. And San Francisco is one of the most liberal cities in the United States. So it gives you a little bit of idea of the surrounding. Get a good map of your city, or get a good map of your neighborhood, or get a good map of your university. Um, for a people group, I'm not quite sure what that would look like if you're just focusing on a people group. But get a good map, and try to understand, study the divisional breakup of that city or that neighborhood or that university. So here's a map of San Francisco with some of the mayor divisions, the different 11 divisions of San Francisco. So that's one way that I can begin to see it. The different 11 districts, that each district has its own supervisor and has its own plan for development and progress. And so I want to get to know who's my supervisor, and how does YWAM work with that supervisor in the good things that they're planning for our city. Here's another way of looking at the city. This is through neighborhoods. San Francisco is a city of neighborhoods. If you look at the top, a little bit on the right side, I'm in the neighborhood called the Tenderloin. So you can see that little neighborhood there. But each of these neighborhoods has a different feel. So get up on a high place. How do the highways flow into the city? And what, if anything, do they separate? Oftentimes, cities are built in ways with deep intentions. Sometimes highways separate ethnic groups. How are the neighborhoods laid out? Get up on a high place and get good visuals of the city. San Francisco has 44 different hills. You saw me the other day on a hill, Mount Davidson, talking about prayer walking. Well, here's another shot of the city. It gives you an idea. Here's from Oakland, looking into the beautiful city of San Francisco across the Bay Bridge. And I spent January 2nd ushering in the new year and sitting on top of this hill and praying for the city and asking God, well, how do you want to use YWAM in the year to come in impacting this territory with the kingdom of God? So get up on a high place and look. And then demographics. Where did the immigrants come from? When did they come there? What brought them to this place? And how are they employed? That's important. Let me give you a little map of London. This was done by a YWAMer in London, and it shows you the boroughs. But now watch closely as I go through London really, really quickly. This was done some years ago, so it probably needs to be updated. But here's where the Bangladeshis live in London. Here's where the Black Africans live in London. Here's where the Black Caribbeans live in London. Here's where the Chinese live in London. Here's where the Indians live in London. Here's where the Irish live in London. Here's where the Pakistanis live. And here's where the whites live. Okay, so it gives you a little bit of idea. You can do it by religion also. Here's where the Christians live. Here's where the Buddhists live. Here's where the Hindus live. Here's where the Jewish live. Here's where the Muslims live. And there's the other religions and the Sikhs and whatnot. So, you know, these are important demographics. My daughter and her husband are moving to London after living in Delhi. And so they kind of use that map or the understanding of demographics, thinking, how can we live close to the Bengali population since my daughter speaks Bengali? So when we're doing church planting or we're setting up a YWAM ministry, we don't look for what is the cheapest place to live. We look for what is the most strategic place to live. Who am I trying to reach with the gospel? Live within walking distance of those people. I can't stress that enough. Oftentimes, YWAM, we locate in the most cheapest place of the city, and our outreach is all the way across, takes us 1 hour to get there. And by the time we get there, we're worn out. Live within walking distance so that you can reach the people that God is calling you to. All right. Now, continuing to talk about ethnic groups. So look at the San Francisco Bay Area here. And this is a study I did when I first came to San Francisco Bay Area. And I took the census information. So when you're doing exegesis, you're starting with the big picture, and then you're coming down to the micro picture. Now we're starting to come down, just like when you're studying a book of the Bible. You read the whole book of the Bible, then you start reading paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, and you're microing down and you're giving titles to each paragraph. And you're thinking, not just, you see the big picture, but now you're coming down to the smaller picture. So look at the unreached people groups of San Francisco. I call this strategic peoples and languages. Not all are unreached, like the Mexicans or the Filipinos or the Koreans, but they are the new missionaries that need to be mobilized to the unreached people groups that are here in the San Francisco Bay Area. If you want to see more of these pie charts, you can go to ywamcity.org and go to our resource page. I think I have about 120 up right now, and I've got another 100 that I'm working on from all over the world. So that gives you the peoples of the SF Bay Area. I'm giving you another far-flung one. This is Dushanbe, Tajikistan. The whole city would be considered unreached. And I'm giving you some of the other subgroups that are there, whether they're the Kyrgyz or the Chinese or the Parsi or the Azerbaijani or the Iranians or the Pashto language people. You begin to see the city, and you can then focus down on who God is calling you to reach. So exegesis of the city, you're looking at the demographics of the immigrants, and then you're looking at the trends and the symbols and the overall history of your city. This takes you back up a little bit to the bigger picture now, then to the micro down. So you're always macro, micro. But what are the repeating trends of your city or your people group or your neighborhood? And I'm talking over maybe 100 years. What are the symbols? What is the history, the redemptive history of your location? You're looking for repeating patterns, just like when you're studying First Peter. What are the words that repeat themselves over and over and over? When you study First Peter, the word imperishable may come out many, many times. The word faith will come out many, many times. Why? Because Peter's trying to get a message across from God's heart, and so it repeats. Same in a city or in a people group or in a university. There will be repeating patterns, and you want to look for those things. Here in San Francisco, our city bird is the phoenix, the mythological figure that rises from the ashes. Why? San Francisco has burned to the ground 7 times in our history. And we have a fighting spirit here in San Francisco that we will always rise back from the ashes. That is not only our symbol, that's the attitude that we carry on the inside if you're a San Franciscan person. Our patron saint is St. Francis of Assisi. Not only do we have a fighting spirit, but there's a tolerant spirit in San Francisco. So what are the trends in your location? What are the symbols? What is the overall history? And how does it repeat itself? So you're going down. If you're looking at like an iceberg here, you're going down deep to the inside, to the soul of the city, or the soul of your people group, or the soul of your university. and you're looking for what repeats itself over and over, and how does that make up the attitude? These are sometimes generalities, and it could be in people groups, like the Tamilian people of India. One of their overarching attributes, it doesn't mean that every person is like this, but one of the overarching attributes of the Tamilian people is they're tremendous orators. They have the gift of the golden tongue. Oh, can they speak well? Not everyone, but generally speaking. The Bengalis are poets. There's such a sweetness about the Bengali people. The Keralites are entrepreneurial leaders. You find them everywhere, Japan or Moscow or in Argentina or different places. You'll always find the Keralite people. So these are the soul of the city that you begin to start seeing as you start studying the things that are underneath the water, that are hidden deep below. And so you want to keep looking for those things. So I do, I read a lot of books. Like this is a book called Season of the Witch. And it's a tremendous history of San Francisco that goes deep into the hippie movement and the different trends of San Francisco, the music of the city. So you want to read books like this or listen to people that talk. Here's a map of San Francisco, not a street map, but this was done by a lady who studied the city, and she studied the music. What music came out of what shipyards? The shipyards were places of suffering. They were African Americans that were brought into the city to build ships during the World War. But out of that suffering came the blues and Motown and music that moved our souls. Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Pointer Sisters, the Temptations, different ones that sing such moving music, not only African American, but also white, like Creedence Clearwater Revival, came out of that suffering. And it was in the shipyards that gave birth to music. So you want to be looking for things like that. And so this is another one of my friends who lives here in San Francisco for the last 25 years. And he shows the underlying streams of emerging consciousness in the city: connectivity, cultural diversity, cultural creativity, integrative spirituality, ecological sustainability, collaborative, and compassion. These are the trends that flow through the city of San Francisco, Christian and non-Christian. And so we begin to see these, all right? So in the end, you're really wanting to get a big picture of what's going on. You're slicing the city into as many parts as you possibly can. And then you're looking at these 5 Ps that I talked to you previously. This is where you're really microing down. What are the pains? What are the problems? Who are the peoples? What are the powers? And what are the potentials? If you do this, you'll really get a great understanding and an exegesis of your local context. So I'd like you to stop and think about this. And I'd like you to just at least answer 2 questions. Where would you take me to in your people group or in your neighborhood or in your city to show me where God is at work? And where would you take me to show me where God needs to be at work? And then talk about that. And don't stop there. Think about what is lovable about the place where I come from? What's the redemptive gift of the place I come from? Who are some of the ethnic groups that are unreached with the gospel where I come from? Who's reaching those people? And then we'll come back and we'll talk some more. God bless.